So one of the issues that has garnered a lot of attention about this memorandum of understanding is the reports that Iran will be receiving $300 billion as part of this deal. And it's a bit misunderstood. And what I want to do is go into what this clause in the deal actually is and what it isn't and where it stands and what to expect from this issue as we move forward with this thing. So just to understand the $300 billion thing. So we're going to use principally two articles that we're going to go through. But to tee us up, let's take a look at what J.D. Vance said when he was asked in his press conference yesterday who would be funding this. Here's J.D.
Exactly is funding that $300 billion.
Oh, I see. So what's interesting about this is there is a great desire from the Arab world and from outside the Arab world to actually get involved in Iran if they behave properly. So, for example, let's say the United Arab Emirates, who've been a great ally over the last, not just few months, but over the last many years, let's say that they would like to invest in building a power plant. That actually is impossible right now because of the way that U.S. sanctions work. And so what we're saying is that if you behave and if the Emiratis themselves want to build a power plant, then we will do the sanctions relief necessary to make that possible. The good thing about that is that it actually creates integration, which is leverage. A world where the Gulf Coast Coalition has greater leverage into the Iranian economy is a world where the Iranians are going to be heavily prevented from misbehaving. So it's a lot of the Gulf Coast Coalition. Again, they see that Iran is weakened. They see there's an opportunity to build a new relationship there. And they're saying if they behave and if the United States is willing to allow this to happen, then absolutely we want to change our relationship with Iran. No, well, I mean, I assume that in the United Arab Emirates there would be private money and so forth that would be part of this. But again, this is so far in advance because it assumes a transformation in Iranian behavior. Sir.
Okay. There's actually a lot in that clip. There's a lot in there. Let me just unpack what he said. He first of all said that it's not exact, let's do it this way. Let's start by reading the clause in the memorandum of understanding that talks about the $300 billion and then compare it to what J.D. Vance just said. It's point 6. The United States of America undertakes with regional partners to develop a definitive, mutually agreed plan with at least $300 billion for the reconstruction and economic development of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Okay, let's just compare that to what J.D. Vance just said. He said that, well, what it really is that there is, I think his exact words were, there is a great desire in the Arab world, in that area, that to invest in Iran. And you can't right now because of the way U.S. sanctions work. So the U.S. is going to make that possible and sort of like grant sanction waivers to allow this investment to flow in. That sounds very different from that the U.S. undertakes to develop a plan with at least $300 billion for reconstruction and economic development. But okay, the mechanism for the implementation of this plan will be finalized as part of a final deal within 60 days. And then it says all required licenses, waivers, and permissions needed for the relevant financial transactions will be granted by the United States of America. And that's the end of that paragraph. Now, at the end of the MOU, it singles out, there are 14 points. In point 13, it singles out that points 1, 4, 5, 10, and 11, 1, 4, 5, 10, and 11 are phase 1, and they're what's supposed to be implemented right away. This is not one of those. This is point 6, and it says specifically that the mechanism for implementation of this $300 billion plan will be finalized as part of a final deal, meaning it's in terms of where things fit in on the timeline. The MOU is not written in chronological order. And that's why at the end of it, you have these 5 clauses that are supposed to be implemented immediately. But this clause specifically says that it comes all the way at the end. So let's keep that in mind as we read. Now, how the Reconstruction Fund for Iran will work and the countries that will give the $300 billion. And this is from Ynet. in Israel, and they pulled from Reuters. Okay, this is based on a Reuters story. They often do this where they take a Reuters story or some other wire service story and they rerun it, but they add in their own comment. A $300 billion private fund designed to trigger investment into Iran is outlined in the U.S.-Iran framework. And more than half that sum has already been committed, a source with direct knowledge of the deal told Reuters. Interesting. The fund is designed to give both sides an economic incentive to conclude a final deal, said the source, who spoke on condition of anonymity because the plan has not yet been announced, as Washington and Tehran prepare to sign Friday. We know that that's been delayed. U.S. and Iranian officials said on Sunday they had agreed on a framework to end their war. Okay, very nice. The new fund is a private investment vehicle. Private investment vehicle. Let's keep this in mind. That's the first fact that we learned about it, because J.D. Vance didn't really answer the question that well. He was asked who's going to fund this, and his answer was, well, there's a lot of interest in the Gulf states and investing in Iran. It's a big market, right? It's a big economy. So we're going to make that possible, implying that the Gulf states were going to do it. But it says here that the new fund is a private investment vehicle, not a reconstruction or reparations program, and will not include any government money or grants, the source said. Okay, so what does this mean? It's a private investment vehicle, not a reconstruction reparations program, meaning they're not laying out a program for reparations. They're not assessing the damage and saying, this is your compensation, this is the reparations. They're not paying reparations. And it's not a reconstruction plan. It's a private investment vehicle. Think of it as a fund. People are putting money into, or people, it's a vehicle for people to invest privately. Like J.D. Vance said, let's say, someone in the Emirates, they want to build a power plant in Iran. It's a vehicle to make that happen. Adding that companies based in the U.S., the Gulf Arab states, Asia, South America, Africa have agreed to commit financing. So companies, these are companies that have agreed, not governments. Investments pledged span energy, logistics, manufacturing, and transport, the source said. Okay. And then it quotes the document. A senior Iranian source told Reuters that Tehran had originally sought $400 billion for war damages, but Washington said it would not provide it. And the fund is supposed to be called the Reconstruction and Development Fund. The mechanism envisages regional countries contributing in various ways. So now it says countries. The Iranian source said, that's what the Iranian said. These include securing loans, establishing credit lines, or directly financing the reconstruction of sites damaged in the war, including facilities such as the Mobarakeh steel complex, refineries, airports, and more broadly, infrastructure affected by the conflict. Iran, one of the Middle East's most largest economies, has attracted almost no significant foreign direct investment the past 4 decades because of sanctions. They haven't been able to. And the country has the world's 2nd largest natural gas reserves and the 4th largest oil reserves. It also has a young, educated population of more than 92 million people, a diversified industrial base, significant untapped potential. In other words, it's saying that there is what to invest in. The investment fund is entirely separate from a parallel negotiating track over the lifting of U.S. sanctions and release of Iranian assets abroad that are frozen. So the $300 billion is totally separate from the whole issue of releasing assets and them getting money in other ways and lifting of sanctions. The fund will not be created or become operational until a final and satisfactory deal is concluded. The memorandum of understanding, once signed, is intended to structure the process over the next 60 days. It'll only be created once the final deal is signed, the source said. Okay. And that's why J.D. Vance always stresses the compliance, right? In an interview with CBS, J.D. Vance said that Iran could gain access to the $300 billion reconstruction fund backed by Gulf states if it complies with an agreement with Washington, including dismantling its nuclear program, eliminating its stockpile of enriched material, and accepting a stringent inspection and enforcement regime. Of course, no mention of the proxy network or anything else. That's a separate issue. The source named Companies from South Korea, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, and the United States among those that had made commitments but declined to provide a comprehensive list. Okay. What does this all mean? So let's understand what the $300 billion is. First of all, according to what we're reading here, the $300 billion is probably never going to come into existence. This fund will never happen. It's kind of like the Board of Peace in Gaza. Okay, this is the framework that we are driving for, but of course the framework's never going to come into play because we're never going to get past phase one. So like all the Gaza reconstruction and the international stabilization force and how investment is going to flow in and the technocrats who are going to run Gaza post Hamas, all of that is nonsense because no one's getting rid of Hamas. Same thing here. This is all at the end when we've dealt with all of the nuclear stuff and Iran is behaving themselves and it's all in place. And then we're going to facilitate this $300 billion fund that's going to invest in infrastructure projects and all kinds of reconstruction in there. This is probably never going to happen. So what is it? The Iranians want money. They are desperate for money. $300 billion is close to what their entire economy is. And what this is doing, the whole point of this $300 billion, everyone's looking at it like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Not only are we signing this MOU, we're giving them $300 billion. A lot of people are outraged over it. Don't be outraged over this. There's other things to be outraged over in this MOU. Don't be outraged over the $300 billion. Because it is a carrot that is being dangled at the end of this process to try to get the Iranians to behave themselves because they'll be licking their chops at the possibility of this $300 billion. I don't think anyone's ever investing in Iran. It's certainly not so long as these guys, Ghalibaf and Aragchi, the guys who are in charge, these neighboring countries aren't going to invest. And that's what this next story is about. Let's take a look at this one. And there's a lot in this story, and we're going to go through it. Gulf states hesitant to fund $300 billion Iran reconstruction, worried of reinforcing regional rival. Duh. Gulf states will likely be reluctant to contribute the minimum $300 billion promised to Iran for reconstruction in the Memorandum of Understanding after months of unprovoked attacks, regional experts told the Jerusalem Post on Thursday. Okay, let's jump down to what matters. Such a commitment would not be easily accepted by Gulf states, Bahraini analyst Dr. Ahmed Al-Khuzai, a managing partner at Khuzai Associates, told the Jerusalem Post. While Gulf states were likely relieved by what they see as a tactical pause, meaning they're happy that the war is on pause, there is an obvious fear that the financial terms of the agreement would allow Iran to further destabilize the region. The pause, which has allowed energy exports to finally continue after months of disruption, welcomes a deeper unease, he explained. There is a well-founded fear that the release of frozen Iranian funds and the lifting of sanctions could empower Tehran's regional networks of militias and proxies, reinforcing the very threats the MOU was meant to contain. This is the most obvious thing in the world. Meaning, let's read between the lines. This isn't just about the $300 billion. It's about the frozen assets, the lifting of sanctions, meaning here's a Bahraini business expert guy, analyst, who is saying, look, we're all saying nice things about this because we're happy that the war is on pause. We're good with that. But having cash flow back to this regime in Tehran is just going to empower all their proxies and cause more destabilization of the region. Meaning they're very uneasy about this whole thing. $300 billion in funds frees resources for militias in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. Though the funds would undoubtedly help stabilize Iran's flailing economy, which is actually a bad thing because how else do you bring a regime to its knees? But we don't want to, right? We don't want regime change. Anyway, even though they would undoubtedly help stabilize Iran's economy, he explained that it would also free resources in Iran to invest in its militias in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen that directly threaten Gulf security. This is why Gulf leaders frame the MOU as fragile, he said. While they welcome a ceasefire and reopening of Hormuz, they fear the agreement may empower Iran rather than restrain it. After suffering months of attacks from Iran, the American commitment raises the uncomfortable question of whether Gulf states would indirectly contribute to rebuilding the very adversary that targeted their infrastructure. He noted, adding that Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Bahrain all feel that the fund risks rewarding aggression and undermining deterrence. That's another huge issue with this fund. The message it sends that Iran attacks everybody and is a regional aggressor, and then in the aftermath of it gets a massive payout. Even Oman and Qatar, the lowest advocates for mediation, these are the guys who are Iran's friends relative to the others, would also struggle to justify financial participation when public opinion remains raw from the damage inflicted on energy facilities, ports, and civilian infrastructure. Let me cut through all the fog here, okay? Because in the Middle East, no one ever talks directly. Everyone always talks in these word salads and obfuscation to try to sound polite and nice and peaceful. That's the way it goes. The bottom line of this story is that this $300 billion fund ain't ever happening. It's one of these Witkoffian clauses in a deal where if there's something that you're not really sure how it's going to work out, just leave it vague and we'll work it out later. So we want to have a $300 billion carrot in the deal dangling in front of the Iranians as a prize that they get if they behave themselves, to try to get them to play ball for 60 days. But it actually doesn't say who's going to put up the money, right? The United States is adamant that not a dime is going to come from American taxpayers. Trump says, oh yeah, we're going to get other people to invest. J.D. Vance says, yeah, lots of people, lots. What did J.D. Vance say? There's a great desire in the Arab world to invest in Iran. And then when I read this article, I'm like, well, actually, there's not such a great desire to invest in Iran. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan told Arabiya, this is my favorite line in this whole piece. The Saudi Foreign Minister told Al Arabiya, that's the Saudi official news outlet, that he had no details on the fund or the concept behind it. What? Hold on a second. Whoa. So here are the Americans going around saying there's a $300 billion fund that we're going to pull together. What was the language here? The United States of America undertakes with regional partners, I assume that's Saudi Arabia, right, to develop a definitive mutually agreed upon plan, blah, 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 blah. And then here's the Saudi foreign minister, not just like, this is, he should know, right? And he said he has no details or on the fund or the concept behind it. And he admitted that there was a significant loss of trust in Iran. Oh, really? You mean because they were bombing you? Which was only just beginning to recover after the Beijing agreement in 2023. He asserted that trust would need to be rebuilt before financial investments could be addressed, meaning like he's basically saying we're nowhere near investing in Iran yet. We still have a lot of trust that we need to rebuild. With that mentality shared by regional leaders, Al-Khuzai said that there has been a push to see the fund tied to verifiable limits on Iran's regional interference and nuclear ambitions. Regional interference means the proxies. You see, J.D. Vance didn't say a word about the proxies. He said that it's all tied to their nuclear ambitions. The nuclear ambitions is not the number one priority for the Gulf states, folks. They're not worried about being nuked. They're worried about Iran being Iran. Without such safeguards, Gulf capitals worry that today's truce could become tomorrow's strategic miscalculation, leaving them to face a far more resilient, a more resilient and emboldened adversary. Practically, there are also apparent limitations that need to be addressed. Investments, he noted, require conditions that Iran cannot yet meet, such as the aforementioned trust, legal protections, political stability. You're not going to invest in Iran. What, the Saudis and Emirati businessmen are going to invest in Iran, which is like a state run by these fanatic enemies of theirs. And there's what legal protections do they have? What trust do they have? How can they trust there's going to be political stability? Quote, between enemy states, this mechanism simply cannot function. Investment is not just financial, it's also a vote of confidence in the host country's future. In the case of Iran, the situation is even more stark. Forget everything else we've said. Even if you love Iran, even if the Saudis think, hey, we're fine with the regime now, the regime is teetering. The people this regime could fall. Why would you invest in Iran? So when J.D. Vance stands up there and says, oh, yeah, there's lots of interest in investing in Iran and all the Arab states. And now you think about it, you're like, well, no, there isn't. Sanctions, opaque regulations, and the ever-present risk of conflict make Iran an unattractive destination for foreign investment. For Gulf states that have suffered direct attacks, the idea of channeling funds into Iran's reconstruction is not only politically implausible, but economically irrational, as it would expose investors to heightened risks while strengthening a state that's still perceived as a strategic adversary. Hello? And then they quote this other expert here talking about how the Arab states were relieved that the war was over, but they don't want to face off against a trigger-happy Tehran. While not willing to risk the agreement by openly rejecting the promised fund, Mahmoudyan stressed that the U.S. made a sizable commitment on behalf of its allies, meaning that Arab states can maintain distance with the simple explanation that it was never their initiative. And I love this. In other words, just like the United States in Clause 1 committed Israel to not attack in Lebanon, and Israel said, we're not part of this deal. So now, in this clause, he's saying, the United States, look, what does it say in this clause? The United States of America undertakes with regional partners to develop this $300 billion fund, and the regional partners are saying, we were never part of that conversation. You saw the Saudi foreign minister says, I don't know what he's talking about. So they have this plausible deniability. They're like, this isn't our plan, and we're not part of this, and we don't really trust these people, and we have no real interest in investing here. Where's the $300 billion going to come from? If J.D. Vance's best answer was the Arab states, and the Arab states are not interested, hello, this thing ain't happening. Anyway, so that's what so this is my bottom line. Okay, listen, we have a picture now. This is one of those things, like, this is why we have to relax about this MOU, okay? These agreements are never what they appear on paper. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. So like when the Gaza 20-point plan comes out, everyone starts reading and go, oh, this is what's going to happen, and this is what's going to happen, and we're going to get rid of Hamas, and we're going to move. No, because the things that are left vague, and the things, I mean, in this case, it's just so laughable. The Americans put stuff in there saying that their allies and their partners are going to be a part of it. And we're going to set up a fund, and the Emiratis and the Qataris and the Saudis, they're all going to invest in it. Except only one problem, they never talked to them about it. This stuff's never going to happen. Okay, so stop talking about the $300 billion. The $300 billion is never going to happen. That's the bottom line here. All right. With that, I'm going to sign off for the week. Have a great Shabbat. Have a great weekend, everyone. And keep a level head, okay? The sky is not falling. Things are good. There's bumps in the road. We'll be okay. God bless.